File edit. Chapter_1_Elena_nurse_story. TXT, adding more detail to reach the required 10,500 character count for Chapter 1 old content. Elena locked her car and walked toward the apartment building, unaware that tomorrow's dinner would set in motion events that would change everything. The Ashworth family's disdain for her profession was about to become their greatest miscalculation. New content. Elena locked her car and walked toward the apartment building, her mind already planning the next day's schedule. She had 3 follow-up appointments with families of former patients, a continuing education seminar on new cardiac monitoring protocols, and a research review meeting for the Pediatric Device Improvement Project she had been leading for the past 6 months. Her work extended far beyond the bedside care that the Ashworth family dismissed as routine nursing duties. The apartment lobby was quiet, illuminated only by security lighting that cast long shadows across the polished floor. Elena's footsteps echoed softly as she made her way to the elevator, her thoughts returning to the mountain of medical journals waiting on her kitchen table. She made it a practice to stay current with the latest research in cardiac care, often identifying improvements that could benefit her young patients before physicians had time to review the same studies. Elena was unaware that tomorrow's dinner would set in motion events that would change everything. The Ashworth family's disdain for her profession was about to become their greatest miscalculation. The process server found Elena in the pediatric cardiac unit at 11:30 on a Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand, and an expression that immediately told her this was not about hospital business. Elena had just finished checking on Timothy Chun, an 8-year-old recovering beautifully from his second heart surgery, when the woman in the conservative business suit approached the nurse's station and asked for Elena Castellanos by name. Elena's colleagues at the nearby workstations looked up with curiosity as the server identified herself and handed over the manila envelope with practiced efficiency. The woman's voice was professionally neutral as she explained that Elena was being served with legal documents requiring her immediate attention. Elena signed the receipt with hands that somehow remained steady, though her heart rate had accelerated in a way that reminded her of the cardiac monitors surrounding her workspace. Janet Rodriguez moved closer as the server departed, her supervisor instincts activated by the obvious tension in Elena's posture. Janet asked quietly if Elena needed to take a break, noting that whatever was in that envelope could probably wait until Elena had finished her morning rounds. Elena appreciated the concern, but knew she needed to understand what Marcus had set in motion before she could focus on anything else. Elena walked to the small break room adjacent to the unit, her steps measured and controlled despite the chaos building in her mind. She opened the envelope with surgical precision, unfolding documents that transformed 5 years of marriage into legal terminology designed to minimize and dismiss. The petition for divorce was thorough, methodical, and devastating in its clinical assessment of their relationship. Marcus had filed on grounds of irreconcilable differences, but the supporting documentation told a different story entirely. His attorney had crafted a narrative that painted Elena as an absent wife whose devotion to her career had made it impossible to build a proper family life. The papers described Elena's work schedule as excessive and unreasonable, characterizing her dedication to patient care as selfish prioritization of strangers over her husband's needs. Elena read each page with growing disbelief. The documents claimed that Elena had refused to adapt her lifestyle to support Marcus's medical practice, had declined multiple opportunities to reduce her working hours, and had shown unwillingness to participate in the social obligations necessary for Marcus's professional advancement. Her commitment to nursing was reframed as stubborn independence that had damaged their marriage beyond repair. The financial disclosures were particularly telling. Marcus's attorney had meticulously documented every joint asset, while systematically minimizing Elena's contributions to their shared life. Her steady income from nursing was acknowledged, but characterized as supplemental rather than substantial. The modest savings account they had built together was attributed primarily to Marcus's surgical fees, with Elena's earnings described as helpful but not essential to their financial stability. Elena folded the papers and returned them to the envelope, her mind already working through the implications. She had expected Marcus to file for divorce eventually, given the increasing tension between them and his family's obvious disapproval of their marriage. What she had not anticipated was the calculated effort to erase her professional accomplishments and reduce her to an inconvenient obstacle in Marcus's path toward the life his family had planned for him. Janet appeared in the doorway of the break room, her expression showing the kind of concern that came from 15 years of nursing supervision and genuine care for her staff. She asked if Elena wanted to talk about whatever was troubling her, explaining that sometimes sharing a burden made it easier to carry. Elena appreciated the offer, but explained that she preferred to keep personal matters separate from work, especially when patients depended on her complete attention. Elena returned to her rounds with renewed focus, channeling her emotional turmoil into meticulous patient care. She spent extra time with Mrs. Patterson, whose grandson was scheduled for a complex procedure the following week. Elena reviewed the pre-operative instructions in detail, answering questions that helped the nervous grandmother understand each step of the process. This was what mattered. This was where Elena's expertise made a real difference in people's lives. Her phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the afternoon with calls from a number she did not recognize. Elena ignored the interruptions until her dinner break, when she finally listened to the voicemail messages. The calls were from Charles Morrison, Marcus's attorney, requesting a meeting to discuss the divorce proceedings and settlement negotiations. His tone was professional, but carried an underlying condescension that suggested he viewed Elena as an amateur entering a game where she was clearly outmatched. Elena returned Morrison's call from the hospital parking lot, standing beside her Honda Civic as she listened to his carefully worded explanation of Marcus's position. Morrison explained that his client was prepared to be generous in the settlement, offering Elena a modest financial package that would allow her to maintain her current lifestyle while freeing Marcus to pursue opportunities that required a more suitable spouse. The implication was clear. Elena should be grateful for whatever she was offered and accept it quietly. Morrison suggested that Elena might want to consider legal representation, though he noted that the divorce was straightforward enough that an expensive attorney might not be necessary. He recommended a local family law practitioner who handled simple cases efficiently and economically. Elena understood that Morrison was attempting to steer her towards someone who would encourage a quick settlement rather than a thorough examination of the marital assets. Elena thanked Morrison for his advice and ended the call without committing to any specific course of action. She understood that Marcus and his family expected her to be intimidated by the legal process, to accept whatever terms they offered rather than fight for fair treatment. They had miscalculated her resolve just as thoroughly as they had misunderstood her professional capabilities. That evening, Elena returned to an apartment that felt different somehow, as if the divorce papers had altered the fundamental nature of the space she had considered home. Marcus had been there during her shift, evidenced by missing clothes and personal items that suggested a systematic removal of his belongings. He had left a note on the kitchen counter explaining that he was staying at his family estate during the divorce proceedings, as his attorney had recommended they avoid contact that might complicate the legal process. Elena found that Marcus had also canceled her access to their joint credit cards and checking account, leaving her with only her personal savings and checking account to manage her immediate expenses. The move was legally permissible but ethically questionable, designed to create financial pressure that would encourage Elena to accept whatever settlement terms Marcus offered. Elena spent the evening researching divorce attorneys online, reading reviews, and examining credentials of local practitioners who specialized in complex marital asset cases. She was particularly interested in attorneys who had experienced challenging attempts to minimize one spouse's professional contributions, understanding that her case would require someone willing to dig deeper into the financial realities of their marriage. Elena discovered that Marcus had significantly underreported their joint assets in his initial filing. The documents failed to mention several investment accounts that had been funded with both of their incomes, and had grossly undervalued the apartment they had purchased together 3 years earlier. Marcus's attorney had apparently assumed that Elena lacked the financial sophistication to identify these discrepancies, another miscalculation that would prove costly. Elena scheduled consultations with 3 different attorneys for the following week, choosing practitioners who had demonstrated success in cases involving professional women whose contributions had been systematically minimized by opposing counsel. She was particularly interested in Sarah Chun, a family law attorney who specialized in cases involving healthcare professionals and understood the unique challenges they faced in divorce proceedings. Elena prepared for these meetings by gathering documentation that told a different story than the one Marcus's attorney had constructed. Her employment records showed consistent salary increases and professional advancement over the past 5 years. Her performance reviews documented exceptional patient care and leadership within the cardiac unit. Her educational transcripts revealed advanced certifications and specialized training that had required significant personal investment and dedication. Elena also compiled financial records that demonstrated her substantial contributions to their shared assets. Her salary had funded their apartment down payment, while Marcus was completing his residency with minimal income. Her steady earnings had supported them both during his transition to private practice, and her health insurance had covered Marcus's medical expenses during a significant illness the previous year. The research revealed additional assets that Marcus had failed to disclose, including a trust fund established by his family that had grown significantly during their marriage. Elena suspected that Victoria Ashworth had been advising Marcus throughout the process, using her own experience with wealth preservation to minimize Elena's potential claims. The family had apparently viewed the marriage as a temporary inconvenience rather than a genuine partnership deserving legal protection. Elena went to bed that night with a clearer understanding of the battle ahead. Marcus and his family expected her to be overwhelmed by their superior resources and legal representation. They anticipated that her modest background and nursing profession would make her an easy target for intimidation and manipulation. They had no idea that Elena's years in critical care had prepared her to perform under pressure, analyze complex situations quickly, and fight for what mattered most. The Ashworth family was about to learn that they had chosen the wrong opponent for their carefully orchestrated campaign of dismissal and humiliation. Elena's dedication to her patients had taught her the value of thorough preparation, methodical execution, and unwavering determination when lives hung in the balance. Her marriage might be ending, but Elena was prepared to ensure that her professional achievements and personal worth would be recognized and respected, regardless of what Marcus's family thought about nurses. The Davidson County Courthouse buzzed with an energy that Elena had not expected when she arrived for what she had assumed would be a routine divorce proceeding. The hallway outside Courtroom B was filled with familiar faces from Marcus's social circle, medical colleagues, and what appeared to be half the membership of the prestigious Hillcrest Country Club, where the Ashworth family held their charity galas and business networking events. Elena recognized several physicians from the private practice consortium where Marcus had recently become a partner, along with board members from the Children's Hospital Foundation that Victoria Ashworth chaired with such visible dedication. The gathering looked less like a divorce hearing and more like a social event designed to demonstrate the community support that Marcus enjoyed among the city's most influential families. Victoria Ashworth stood at the center of the largest group, resplendent in a navy blue designer suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly salary. Her silver hair was styled in the perfect coiffure that had become her signature at charity luncheons and medical society gatherings. Victoria's voice carried clearly across the marble hallway as she explained to anyone within earshot how unfortunate it was that Marcus had to endure such an ordeal, but how necessary it was to protect his future from what she delicately termed an unsuitable marriage. Elena entered the courtroom alongside her attorney, Sarah Chun, whose calm confidence had impressed Elena during their initial consultation the previous week. Sarah had specialized in family law cases involving healthcare professionals for over 15 years, and her track record included several high-profile victories against opposing counsel who had underestimated the professional worth of nurses, physician assistants, and other medical specialists. Judge William Harrison took his place at the bench with the measured authority of someone who had presided over countless contentious divorce cases. His reputation for fairness was balanced by an intolerance for grandstanding and manipulation that had earned him respect from family law attorneys throughout the district. Elena noticed that Judge Harrison's eyes swept across the packed courtroom with mild surprise, as if he was wondering why a straightforward divorce proceeding had attracted such an audience. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table beside his attorney, Charles Morrison, whose silver hair and expensive suit projected the kind of legal gravitas that came with decades of representing wealthy clients in high-stakes litigation. Morrison had built his career on protecting family fortunes during divorce proceedings, and his opening statement made it clear that he intended to portray Elena as a gold digger whose modest background and common profession made her unworthy of significant financial consideration. Morrison rose to address the court with theatrical precision, his voice carrying the confident authority of someone accustomed to winning through intimidation rather than evidence. He painted a picture of Marcus as a dedicated physician whose promising career had been hampered by marriage to a woman who refused to prioritize their relationship over her own selfish professional ambitions. Morrison described Elena's nursing career as admirable in its own small way, but fundamentally incompatible with the social and professional obligations required of someone married to a rising surgical star. Elena listened to Morrison's characterization of her professional life with growing amazement. According to his version of events, Elena worked long hours out of stubbornness rather than dedication, chose difficult cases to prove herself rather than to save lives, and had consistently refused reasonable requests to modify her schedule to support Marcus's career advancement. Morrison suggested that Elena's income, while steady, was negligible compared to Marcus's earning potential and therefore should not factor significantly into any settlement calculations. Morrison called his first witness, Dr. Richard Pemberton, chief of surgery at Marcus's private practice consortium. Pemberton testified that Marcus was one of the most promising young surgeons he had encountered in 3 decades of practice, with the potential to become a leader in cardiac surgery if he could focus completely on his professional development. Pemberton noted that successful surgeons required supportive spouses who understood the demands of medical practice and were willing to manage social obligations that were crucial for building referral networks and establishing professional relationships. Pemberton's testimony was followed by Margaret Whitfield, president of the Medical Society Auxiliary and longtime friend of Victoria Ashworth. Whitfield explained the importance of physician spouses in maintaining the social connections that were essential for medical practice success. She described the charity work, fundraising events, and community leadership roles that were expected of doctors' wives, noting that these responsibilities required significant time and social skills that were difficult to develop while working a demanding full-time career. Elena watched the parade of witnesses with professional detachment, recognizing the careful orchestration of testimony designed to establish that her career was an impediment to Marcus's success rather than an achievement worthy of respect. Each witness reinforced the narrative that Elena's dedication to nursing was selfish rather than noble, inconvenient rather than valuable, and ultimately incompatible with her duties as the wife of an important physician. Sarah Chin's cross-examination of each witness was brief but pointed, establishing that none of them had any direct knowledge of Elena's professional capabilities or contributions to the marriage. Sarah noted that Dr. Pemberton had never worked directly with Elena despite their both being employed in cardiac care, and that Margaret Whitfield's opinions about physician spouses were based on social expectations rather than legal requirements or evidence of actual marital problems. The courtroom atmosphere shifted when Morrison announced that he was calling Victoria Ashworth as a character witness for Marcus. Victoria approached the witness stand with the commanding presence that had made her a formidable force in charity circles and social organizations throughout the city. Her testimony began with a detailed account of Marcus's upbringing, education, and professional achievements, establishing him as the kind of son and husband that any family would be proud to claim. Victoria's description of Elena was more subtle but no less damaging. She spoke of Elena's background with what appeared to be sympathetic understanding, noting that Elena had worked hard to overcome the limitations of her modest upbringing and had achieved a respectable position in her chosen field. Victoria explained that the Ashworth family had initially welcomed Elena into their circle, hoping that love might bridge the significant differences in background and social understanding that made their marriage challenging from the beginning. Victoria testified that Elena had never quite adjusted to the social expectations that came with marriage to someone of Marcus's stature. She described Elena's reluctance to participate in family gatherings, her absence from important medical society events, and her general unwillingness to prioritize the relationship-building activities that were essential for Marcus's professional advancement. Victoria painted Elena as well-meaning, but ultimately incompatible with the lifestyle that Marcus's career required. Morrison guided Victoria through increasingly specific examples of Elena's supposed social failures. Victoria described charity events where Elena had failed to appear, family gatherings where Elena had left early to attend to work emergencies, and social occasions where Elena's conversation had focused on her patients rather than the topics that interested other physicians' wives. Victoria's testimony was delivered with the kind of disappointed sadness that suggested she had tried her best to help Elena adapt, but had eventually accepted that some differences could not be overcome. Sarah Chun rose for cross-examination with a calm confidence that immediately changed the energy in the courtroom. Her first questions were gentle, asking Victoria to elaborate on her understanding of Elena's professional responsibilities and the nature of modern nursing practice. Victoria answered with the kind of vague generalities that suggested her knowledge of healthcare was limited to her charity work and social connections within the medical community. Sarah asked Victoria to describe her own career background and professional achievements, establishing that Victoria had never worked outside the home and had no direct experience with the demands of medical practice. Sarah noted that Victoria's charitable activities, while admirable, were primarily social in nature and did not require the technical expertise or life or death decision-making that characterized Elena's daily work responsibilities. Victoria's answers became increasingly condescending as Sarah pressed her for specific details about nursing practice and patient care responsibilities. Victoria acknowledged that she had never observed Elena at work, had never spoken with Elena's colleagues or supervisors, and had no direct knowledge of Elena's professional reputation or capabilities. When Sarah asked Victoria to explain why she felt qualified to judge Elena's career priorities, Victoria's composure began to crack. Victoria's voice took on an edge of irritation as she explained that she understood the importance of family loyalty and social responsibility, values that seemed less important to Elena than her work obligations. Victoria noted that nursing was certainly a noble profession in its own way, but that Elena seemed to treat it as if it were equivalent to Marcus's surgical practice, which was clearly unrealistic given the differences in education, responsibility, and social importance between the two fields. Sarah asked Victoria to elaborate on her views about the relative importance of different medical professions, and Victoria's response revealed the depth of her prejudice with startling clarity. Victoria explained that while she respected all healthcare workers, there was an obvious hierarchy based on education, training, and responsibility. Physicians made life or death decisions that required years of medical school and residency training, while nurses followed their instructions and provided basic care that, while important, did not require the same level of expertise or judgment. The courtroom grew quieter as Victoria continued, her voice gaining confidence as she warmed to a subject she felt qualified to address. Victoria noted that Elena seemed to have an inflated sense of her own importance in the medical hierarchy, treating her nursing duties as if they were equivalent to physician responsibilities. Victoria suggested that this confusion about professional roles had contributed to Elena's inability to understand her proper role as Marcus's wife and partner in building his medical career. Sarah's next question was delivered with deceptive casualness. She asked Victoria to explain exactly what she believed Elena's professional contributions were worth and what Elena should have done differently to support Marcus's career appropriately. Victoria's answer would prove to be the most costly mistake of the entire proceeding. Victoria leaned forward in the witness chair, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having her opinions respected and accepted without question. She explained that Elena was, fundamentally, only a nurse. While nursing was certainly a respectable profession for someone of Elena's background, it was not the kind of career that should take precedence over family obligations or interfere with a husband's professional advancement. Victoria noted that Elena seemed to believe her work was somehow equivalent to Marcus's surgical practice, which was obviously unrealistic and indicated a fundamental misunderstanding of medical professional hierarchies. Victoria's voice grew more animated as she continued, apparently encouraged by what she interpreted as the courtroom's respectful attention to her testimony. She explained that Elena's insistence on working long hours and accepting emergency responsibilities was really a form of selfishness disguised as dedication. Victoria suggested that Elena used her nursing career as an excuse to avoid the social and family responsibilities that were expected of someone in her position as Marcus's wife. The courtroom remained unnaturally quiet as Victoria delivered what she clearly intended as the definitive statement about Elena's professional worth. Victoria looked directly at Elena as she spoke, her voice carrying the kind of dismissive authority that had silenced opposition in countless charity board meetings and social gatherings. She declared that Elena was only a nurse and asked what possible contribution someone in such a position could make to the kind of family legacy that the Ashworth family had spent generations building through medical excellence and community leadership. Judge Harrison's expression did not change, but Elena noticed that his pen had stopped moving across his legal pad. The silence in the courtroom stretched for several seconds before Sarah Chun asked Victoria to clarify her statement about nursing being only a profession of limited value and contribution. Victoria seemed pleased to elaborate, apparently believing that she was making a compelling case for Marcus's position. Victoria explained that while she certainly respected nurses and the work they did, it was important to maintain realistic perspectives about professional hierarchies and social responsibilities. Nursing was essentially a service profession that involved following physicians' orders and providing basic patient care, which was valuable but not comparable to the education, training, and responsibility required for surgical practice. Victoria suggested that Elena's confusion about her professional importance had made it impossible for her to understand her appropriate role in supporting Marcus's much more significant medical career. Sarah asked Victoria whether she believed that nursing was essentially menial work, and Victoria's response sealed her fate. Victoria explained that nursing was certainly more than menial work, but that it was fundamentally supportive rather than leadership-oriented. Nurses followed protocols established by physicians and provided routine care that, while necessary, did not require the kind of advanced decision-making and technical expertise that characterized real medical practice. Victoria compared nursing to other service professions that were respectable but clearly subordinate to the professional roles they supported. Elena watched Victoria's testimony with growing amazement at the depth of ignorance and prejudice that the woman was revealing to a courtroom full of witnesses. Victoria apparently believed that her charitable work with medical organizations had given her expertise about healthcare practice that qualified her to dismiss Elena's professional achievements with authority. Elena also noticed that Judge Harrison was now watching Victoria with the kind of focused attention that suggested her testimony was not proceeding as favorably as she believed. Victoria concluded her characterization of nursing by noting that Elena seemed to believe her work was somehow equivalent to being a physician, which was obviously unrealistic and suggested either confusion or deliberate misrepresentation of her professional importance. Victoria declared that Elena was only a nurse, and that her insistence on treating her career as if it were somehow equal to Marcus's surgical practice had made it impossible for her to be the kind of wife that Marcus deserved and needed for his continued professional success. Sarah Chun thanked Victoria for her candid assessment of nursing as a profession and noted that she would have some additional questions for Victoria during the defense presentation of evidence. Sarah's tone was perfectly respectful, but Elena detected an undertone of satisfaction that suggested Victoria had provided exactly the kind of testimony that Sarah had been hoping to elicit. Elena looked around the courtroom and noticed that several of the physicians in attendance appeared uncomfortable with Victoria's sweeping dismissal of nursing as a profession. Elena also observed that Judge Harrison was making extensive notes, which suggested that Victoria's testimony was being preserved for careful review. Elena suspected that Victoria had just made a series of statements that would prove far more damaging to Marcus's case than anything Elena's own attorney might have planned. The proceedings concluded for the day with Morrison announcing that he would present additional character witnesses when the hearing resumed the following week. Elena left the courtroom with Sarah Chun, who seemed remarkably pleased with how the day had proceeded. Sarah noted that Victoria's testimony had exceeded her most optimistic expectations and had provided several opportunities for devastating rebuttal that would demonstrate just how wrong the Ashworth family was about Elena's true professional worth. The following Monday morning brought an entirely different energy to Courtroom B as Sarah Chun rose to begin the defense presentation of evidence. The packed gallery that had seemed so supportive of Marcus during Victoria's testimony now carried an undercurrent of uncertainty, as if the confidence that had characterized the previous week's proceedings had been replaced by something approaching apprehension. Elena sat beside her attorney with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout Victoria's devastating testimony, but there was something different in her posture now. The quiet dignity that had marked her presence during the plaintiff's case had evolved into something more substantial, as if she was finally prepared to reveal truths that had been carefully preserved for exactly this moment. Sarah Chun addressed Judge Harrison with the methodical precision of an attorney who had spent the weekend preparing to systematically dismantle every assumption that Morrison and the Ashworth family had constructed about Elena's professional worth. Sarah explained that the defense would present evidence that would provide the court with a complete and accurate picture of Elena's career achievements, professional standing, and financial contributions to the marriage that Marcus's attorney had so carefully misrepresented. Sarah's first exhibit was Elena's complete employment file from Riverside Medical Center, a document that Morrison had apparently never requested during discovery despite his confident assertions about Elena's professional limitations. Sarah handed copies to Judge Harrison and Morrison while explaining that the court would find Elena's actual job title and responsibilities quite different from the characterizations that had been presented during the plaintiff's case. Judge Harrison examined the employment records with the careful attention of someone who understood that he was seeing evidence that might fundamentally change his understanding of the case before him. Elena's official title was Director of Pediatric Cardiac Intensive Care, a position that required advanced certification, specialized training, and demonstrated leadership capabilities that placed her among the most qualified nursing professionals in the region. Sarah explained that Elena's position at Riverside Medical Center involved supervision of 43 registered nurses, coordination with cardiac surgical teams for complex pediatric procedures, and direct responsibility for patient care protocols that had resulted in some of the lowest mortality rates for pediatric cardiac surgery in the southeastern United States. Sarah noted that Elena's unit had received national recognition for excellence in patient care and had been featured in medical journals for innovative approaches to post-operative monitoring and family support services. Morrison objected that Elena's job title was irrelevant to the question of marital assets and spousal support, but Judge Harrison overruled the objection and instructed Sarah to continue her presentation of Elena's professional qualifications. Elena noticed that several physicians in the gallery were leaning forward with obvious interest, as if they were hearing information that contradicted their previous assumptions about Elena's career status. Sarah's second exhibit was Elena's educational transcript, which revealed a level of specialized training that went far beyond the basic nursing degree that Victoria had dismissively characterized as adequate for routine patient care. Elena held a Master of Science in Nursing with a specialty in pediatric cardiac care, advanced certification in critical care nursing, and additional credentials in cardiac rhythm interpretation, pediatric advanced life support, and emergency cardiac procedures. Sarah explained that Elena's educational achievements represented 6 years of post-secondary study, followed by 3 years of specialized residency training in pediatric cardiac intensive care. Sarah noted that Elena's educational investment was comparable to that required for physician specialization, and that her advanced certifications were recognized by medical societies throughout the country as indicating the highest levels of professional competence and expertise. Elena watched Victoria's face as Sarah detailed the educational requirements that Elena had satisfied to reach her current position. Victoria's confident expression from the previous week had been replaced by something approaching confusion, as if she was hearing about professional requirements that she had never considered or understood. Elena noticed that Marcus was also looking increasingly uncomfortable as the extent of Elena's qualifications became clear to everyone in the courtroom. Sarah presented Elena's salary history as her third exhibit, and the financial revelations proved even more devastating to Morrison's characterization of Elena as a financially dependent spouse whose income was supplemental to Marcus's earnings. Elena's annual salary was $87,000, which exceeded Marcus's income during 3 of their 5 years of marriage and was substantially higher than the modest nursing wages that Morrison had suggested during his opening statement. Sarah explained that Elena's salary reflected not only her advanced position and specialized skills, but also the premium that hospitals paid for nurses with her level of expertise and leadership capabilities. Sarah noted that Elena's income had been the primary support for the couple during Marcus's final year of residency and his transition to private practice, contradicting Morrison's suggestion that Elena had been financially dependent on Marcus throughout their marriage. Elena had anticipated that the salary revelations would surprise the courtroom, but she had not expected the visible shock that crossed Victoria's face as the numbers became public record. Victoria had apparently assumed that Elena's nursing income was modest enough to justify her dismissive attitude toward Elena's career, and the evidence that Elena had actually been the higher earner for much of the marriage seemed to contradict everything Victoria thought she understood about professional hierarchies. Sarah's fourth exhibit consisted of performance evaluations from Elena's supervisors at Riverside Medical Center, documents that painted a picture of professional excellence that bore no resemblance to Morrison's characterization of Elena as a routine employee in a service profession. Elena's evaluations consistently rated her performance as exceptional, with specific commendations for her clinical expertise, leadership abilities, and innovative approaches to patient care that had improved outcomes for critically ill children. Elena's most recent evaluation included a recommendation for promotion to Associate Chief of Nursing for Cardiac Services, a position that would place her among the senior administrative leadership of one of the region's most respected medical institutions. The evaluation noted that Elena's expertise in pediatric cardiac care was recognized nationally, and that her research contributions had influenced protocols at children's hospitals throughout the country. Sarah explained that Elena's professional reputation extended far beyond Riverside Medical Center, as evidenced by speaking invitations from medical conferences, consultation requests from other hospitals, and research collaborations with physician specialists who valued Elena's expertise in critical care nursing. Sarah noted that Elena's professional achievements contradicted every assumption that the plaintiff's witnesses had made about nursing as a profession of limited scope and responsibility. Elena noticed that Dr. Pemberton, who had testified about Marcus's promising surgical career, was studying the performance evaluations with obvious interest and what appeared to be genuine surprise. Elena suspected that Pemberton had never considered the level of expertise and responsibility that characterized advanced nursing practice, and that his assumptions about professional hierarchies were being challenged by the evidence Sarah was presenting. Sarah's fifth exhibit was a collection of letters from physicians who had worked with Elena throughout her career, testimonials that described her professional capabilities in terms that contradicted Victoria's dismissive characterization of nursing as a subordinate profession. The letters came from cardiac surgeons, intensivists, and department chiefs who described Elena's expertise as essential to successful patient outcomes and her leadership as crucial to the effectiveness of their medical teams. One letter came from Dr. Michael Rosenberg, chief of pediatric cardiac surgery at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, who described Elena as one of the most knowledgeable and capable intensive care nurses he had encountered in 25 years of surgical practice. Dr. Rosenberg noted that Elena's expertise in post-operative monitoring and family support had contributed to survival rates that exceeded national averages, and that her insights often influenced surgical planning and recovery protocols. Another letter came from Dr. Patricia Williams, Director of Nursing Research at Duke University Medical Center, who described Elena's contributions to evidence-based practice improvements that had been adopted by pediatric cardiac programs throughout the country. Dr. Williams noted that Elena's research had been published in peer-reviewed journals and had influenced national standards for pediatric cardiac intensive care. Elena watched Morrison's expression as Sarah read excerpts from the physician testimonials, noting that Marcus's attorney appeared increasingly uncomfortable with evidence that systematically destroyed the characterizations he had presented during his opening statement. Morrison had apparently conducted discovery based on assumptions about Elena's professional status rather than investigating the actual facts of her career achievements. Sarah's sixth exhibit was Elena's research portfolio, which included published articles in medical journals, presentation abstracts from national conferences, and documentation of her contributions to clinical protocol development that had improved patient care outcomes at multiple institutions. Sarah explained that Elena's research focused on reducing complications and improving survival rates for children undergoing cardiac surgery, work that had practical implications for patient care throughout the pediatric cardiac surgery community. Elena's published research included studies on post-operative monitoring protocols that had reduced readmission rates, family support interventions that improved patient psychological outcomes, and nurse-led initiatives that had decreased infection rates in pediatric cardiac intensive care units. Sarah noted that Elena's research contributions placed her among the most respected nurse researchers in pediatric cardiac care, a level of professional achievement that contradicted Morrison's suggestion that nursing was a profession of limited intellectual scope. Judge Harrison was taking extensive notes as Sarah presented each piece of evidence, and Elena noticed that his expression had evolved from mild interest to obvious fascination with the extent of Elena's professional achievements. Elena suspected that Judge Harrison was beginning to understand that the plaintiff's case had been built on fundamentally inaccurate assumptions about Elena's career status and financial worth. Sarah presented her seventh exhibit, which consisted of Elena's consulting agreements with medical device manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, and other hospitals that sought her expertise in pediatric cardiac care protocol development. The consulting work generated additional income of $20,000 to $30,000 annually and demonstrated that Elena's expertise was valued by organizations throughout the healthcare industry. Elena's consulting work included advisory positions with companies developing cardiac monitoring equipment specifically for pediatric patients, protocol review for clinical trials of new cardiac medications, and training program development for other hospitals seeking to improve their pediatric cardiac care outcomes. Sarah noted that Elena's consulting income reflected the market value of her specialized knowledge and experience, providing additional evidence of her significant financial contributions to the marriage. Victoria was visibly struggling to maintain her composure as the evidence mounted against every assumption she had made about Elena's professional status. Elena noticed that Victoria kept glancing at Marcus with expressions that suggested confusion and growing concern about the implications of Elena's actual career achievements. The confident dismissal that had characterized Victoria's testimony the previous week had been replaced by obvious uncertainty about the strength of their legal position. Sarah's eighth exhibit was Elena's professional membership documentation, which showed her active participation in national nursing organizations, specialty societies, and research consortiums that represented the most advanced practitioners in pediatric cardiac care. Elena held leadership positions in the American Association of Critical Care Nurses, the Society of Pediatric Cardiovascular Nurses, and the International Association for Pediatric Cardiac Intensive Care. Sarah explained that Elena's leadership roles in professional organizations included chairing committees that developed national standards for pediatric cardiac nursing practice, serving on editorial boards for medical journals, and participating in accreditation reviews for other hospitals seeking certification for pediatric cardiac programs. Sarah noted that these professional activities demonstrated Elena's recognition as a leader in her field and her influence on nursing practice standards throughout the country. Elena watched the gallery as Sarah detailed her professional organization involvement, noting that several physicians appeared to be reassessing their previous assumptions about Elena's career status. Elena suspected that many of the medical professionals in attendance had never considered the level of expertise and leadership that characterized advanced nursing practice, and that their understanding of professional hierarchies was being challenged by the evidence Sarah was presenting. Morrison rose to object that Elena's professional achievements, while admirable, were not relevant to the question of spousal support and asset division. Morrison argued that nursing, regardless of Elena's individual accomplishments, remained a profession with limited earning potential compared to surgical practice, and that Marcus's future income prospects justified the settlement terms they had proposed. Judge Harrison sustained Morrison's objection in part, but noted that Elena's demonstrated earning capacity and professional status were clearly relevant to determinations of spousal support and asset division. Judge Harrison instructed Sarah to continue her presentation, but to focus on evidence that directly related to the financial aspects of the divorce proceedings. Sarah thanked Judge Harrison and noted that her remaining exhibits would demonstrate Elena's financial contributions to the marriage and her future earning potential in ways that would provide the court with accurate information for making equitable decisions about asset division and support obligations. Sarah's tone suggested that the most devastating evidence was yet to come, and Elena noticed that Victoria was now looking genuinely frightened about what additional revelations might emerge. Elena maintained her calm composure as Sarah prepared to present the final exhibits that would complete the systematic destruction of every assumption that Marcus and his family had made about her professional worth. The Ashworth family had built their legal strategy on the foundation of their prejudices about nursing as a profession, and Elena was watching that foundation crumble as Sarah methodically revealed the truth about Elena's career achievements and financial value. The courtroom atmosphere had shifted completely from the confident dismissal that had characterized Victoria's testimony to something approaching stunned recognition that the Ashworth family had fundamentally misjudged the woman they had spent years trying to diminish and dismiss. Sarah Chin's final exhibit arrived in the form of an unexpected witness who had requested permission to testify on Elena's behalf despite not being listed on the original witness roster. Dr. Amanda Stevens, Chief Executive Officer of Riverside Medical Center, had personally driven to the courthouse after learning about the proceedings from colleagues who had attended the earlier sessions. Dr. Stevens approached the witness stand with the commanding presence of someone who had spent 15 years managing one of the region's most prestigious medical institutions. Her testimony would prove to be the most devastating blow to the Ashworth family's carefully constructed narrative about Elena's professional limitations. Dr. Stevens explained that she had become aware of the divorce proceedings when several board members mentioned that Elena Castellanos was facing personal challenges that might affect her availability for an upcoming promotion. Dr. Stevens noted that she felt compelled to provide accurate information about Elena's value to the hospital, given the apparent misunderstandings that had emerged during the legal proceedings. Dr. Stevens testified that Elena was considered irreplaceable by the medical staff at Riverside Medical Center, and that her departure would create a void that would be extremely difficult to fill given the specialized nature of her expertise and leadership capabilities. Dr. Stevens noted that Elena's unit had achieved patient outcomes that consistently exceeded national benchmarks, and that other hospitals regularly requested consultation about protocols that Elena had developed. Sarah asked Dr. Stevens to describe Elena's role in the hospital's recent accreditation review, and the answer provided another devastating contradiction to Victoria's characterization of nursing as routine work. Dr. Stevens explained that accreditation reviewers had specifically commended Elena's leadership and had cited her unit as an example of best practices in pediatric cardiac care that other institutions should emulate. Dr. Stevens revealed that Elena had been offered positions at 3 other major medical centers over the past 2 years, including Johns Hopkins and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, with salary offers ranging from $120,000 to $150,000 annually. Dr. Stevens noted that Elena had declined these opportunities due to her commitment to Riverside Medical Center and her satisfaction with her current role. The salary figures sent visible shockwaves through the courtroom gallery, particularly among the Ashworth family members who had assumed that Elena's earning potential was limited by the nature of her profession. Victoria's face had gone completely pale as she realized that Elena's actual market value exceeded Marcus's current income from his surgical practice. Sarah asked Dr. Stevens whether the hospital administration was aware of Elena's consulting work with other institutions, and Dr. Stevens' answer revealed another dimension of Elena's professional influence that the Ashworth family had completely underestimated. Dr. Stevens explained that Elena regularly provided expert consultation for legal cases involving medical malpractice, particularly in pediatric cardiac care, where her expertise was considered among the most authoritative in the southeastern United States. Dr. Stevens noted that Elena's consultation work included a recent case involving St. Mary's Hospital, where Elena had identified protocol failures that had contributed to poor patient outcomes. Dr. Stevens explained that Elena's analysis had been instrumental in identifying systemic problems that the hospital had subsequently corrected, preventing future complications and potentially saving lives. Elena noticed that Marcus had begun whispering urgently with Morrison apparently recognizing the significance of St. Mary's Hospital as his former place of employment during residency. Elena suspected that Marcus was beginning to understand that Elena's professional network and expertise extended into areas that could prove problematic for his own career if the divorce proceedings became more adversarial. Sarah asked Dr. Stevens to describe Elena's involvement in medical device development, and the answer revealed yet another source of income that Morrison had failed to discover during his investigation of marital assets. Dr. Stevens explained that Elena held patents on 3 medical devices used in pediatric cardiac monitoring, innovations that had emerged from her clinical experience and had been developed in collaboration with medical device manufacturers. Dr. Stevens testified that Elena's patent royalties generated substantial passive income that would continue for the duration of the patent protection periods, providing long-term financial security that contradicted Morrison's suggestions about Elena's limited earning potential and economic dependence on Marcus. The royalty income averaged $15,000 to $20,000 annually and was expected to increase as the devices gained wider adoption in pediatric cardiac programs throughout the country. Victoria was now visibly struggling to maintain any semblance of composure as Dr. Stevens systematically destroyed every assumption that had formed the foundation of the Ashworth family's legal strategy. Elena noticed that Victoria kept looking around the courtroom as if seeking some form of support or validation, but finding only expressions of surprise and what appeared to be admiration for Elena's professional achievements. Sarah's final question to Dr. Stevens concerned Elena's professional relationship with Judge Harrison's own family, a revelation that would prove to be the most personally devastating blow to the Ashworth family's position. Sarah asked Dr. Stevens whether Elena had provided direct patient care for any members of prominent local families, and Dr. Stevens confirmed that Elena had been the primary nurse for Judge Harrison's grandson during his cardiac surgery the previous year. Dr. Stevens explained that Judge Harrison's grandson had required complex heart surgery at 6 months of age, and that Elena's expertise had been specifically requested by the surgical team due to the challenging nature of the case. Dr. Stevens noted that Judge Harrison and his family had expressed profound gratitude for Elena's care, and that the successful outcome had been attributed in part to Elena's exceptional monitoring and family support during the critical recovery period. Judge Harrison's expression remained professionally neutral, but Elena noticed that he was now regarding her with what appeared to be recognition and respect. Elena suspected that Judge Harrison was remembering Elena's role in his grandson's recovery and was reassessing everything he had heard about Elena's professional capabilities during the preceding testimony. Sarah thanked Dr. Stevens and announced that the defense had no further witnesses, but noted that she would like to address the court about the implications of the evidence that had been presented. Sarah explained that the testimony and documentation had revealed fundamental errors in the plaintiff's characterization of Elena's professional status, earning capacity, and financial contributions to the marriage. Morrison rose to cross-examine Dr. Stevens, but appeared uncertain about how to challenge testimony that had so thoroughly contradicted his client's position. Morrison asked a few perfunctory questions about hospital employment policies and salary structures, but his questions seemed designed more to demonstrate that he was fulfilling his obligation to cross-examine rather than to challenge any specific aspects of Dr. Stevens's testimony. Victoria had begun crying quietly in the gallery, apparently overwhelmed by the magnitude of her miscalculation and the public humiliation of having her prejudices about Elena's profession exposed as completely unfounded. Elena noticed that several gallery members were now looking at Victoria with expressions that suggested sympathy mixed with embarrassment about the ignorance that Victoria had displayed during her own testimony. Marcus was conferring intensely with Morrison, their whispered conversation suggesting growing panic about the legal and financial implications of the evidence that Sarah had presented. Elena suspected that Marcus was beginning to understand that his family's strategy of dismissing Elena's professional worth had backfired spectacularly and had potentially damaged his own reputation among the medical professionals who had witnessed the proceedings. Dr. Stevens concluded her testimony by noting that Elena represented the highest standards of nursing excellence, and that any characterization of her work as routine or subordinate reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of modern medical practice. Dr. Stevens explained that successful patient outcomes in complex cardiac care required collaboration between physicians and nurses with specialized expertise, and that Elena's contributions were essential rather than supplementary to the medical team's effectiveness. Judge Harrison thanked Dr. Stevens for her testimony and announced a brief recess before hearing closing arguments. Elena noticed that the courtroom atmosphere had transformed completely from the confident dismissal that had characterized the opening day to something approaching stunned recognition that the Ashworth family had committed a catastrophic error in judgment. Elena remained seated beside Sarah Chun as the gallery began to empty, many of the physicians and medical professionals engaging in animated conversations about what they had learned about Elena's career achievements. Elena suspected that word of the proceedings would spread quickly through the medical community, potentially creating professional consequences for the Ashworth family that extended far beyond the legal implications of the divorce settlement. Victoria was being comforted by family members in the gallery, but her distress appeared to stem from recognition that her public testimony about nursing as a subordinate profession would be remembered by medical colleagues who had witnessed her profound ignorance about Elena's actual expertise and professional standing. Elena realized that Victoria's reputation in the medical community charity circles might never recover from the humiliation of her prejudiced testimony being so thoroughly contradicted by evidence. Judge Harrison returned to the bench after the recess with an expression that suggested the evidence presented had fundamentally altered his understanding of the case before him. His opening remarks would prove to be a devastating rebuke to the Ashworth family's strategy and a complete vindication of Elena's professional worth. Judge Harrison began by noting that he had presided over countless divorce proceedings involving professional couples, but that he had rarely encountered such a profound disconnect between the characterizations presented by one party and the actual evidence revealed during testimony. Judge Harrison explained that the court had heard testimony that demonstrated either willful misrepresentation or shocking ignorance about the professional achievements and financial contributions of one of the parties. Judge Harrison addressed Victoria directly, his voice carrying the controlled authority of someone who had been personally offended by what he had witnessed during the proceedings. Judge Harrison noted that Victoria's testimony about nursing as a subordinate profession had revealed prejudices that were not only factually incorrect, but professionally damaging to the medical community's understanding of collaborative patient care. Judge Harrison explained that his own family had benefited directly from Elena's expertise and dedication, and that Victoria's characterization of Elena's work as routine or subordinate contradicted everything he had observed about Elena's professional capabilities during his grandson's critical illness. Judge Harrison noted that Victoria's testimony had demonstrated a level of ignorance about modern medical practice that was particularly troubling given her leadership role in medical community organizations. The judge's rebuke continued with specific reference to Morrison's characterization of Elena's income and professional prospects as limited by the nature of her profession. Judge Harrison noted that the evidence had revealed Elena's earning capacity to be substantially higher than Marcus's current income, and that her professional reputation and expertise positioned her for continued financial success that contradicted every assumption underlying the plaintiff's settlement proposal. Judge Harrison announced that the court would award Elena 70% of the marital assets, noting that her financial contributions during the marriage had been systematically undervalued by the plaintiff's legal team. Judge Harrison explained that Elena's income had supported the couple during Marcus's transition to private practice, and that her professional achievements during the marriage had enhanced her earning capacity in ways that justified substantial spousal support from Marcus rather than the minimal settlement he had proposed. The gallery remained silent as Judge Harrison detailed the financial implications of his ruling. Elena would receive the apartment they had shared, Marcus's retirement account contributions during the marriage period, and ongoing spousal support of $3,000 monthly for a period of 5 years. Judge Harrison noted that these awards reflected Elena's actual financial contributions to the marriage and her professional value, rather than the diminished worth that had been suggested by the plaintiff's witnesses. Marcus appeared stunned by the magnitude of the financial judgment, apparently having believed that his family's social influence and legal strategy would result in a minimal settlement for Elena. Elena noticed that Marcus was looking around the courtroom as if seeking support from gallery members who had initially appeared so confident about the outcome of the proceedings. Victoria was no longer crying, but had instead adopted the frozen expression of someone processing a catastrophic miscalculation. Elena realized that Victoria was beginning to understand that her courtroom testimony had not only failed to diminish Elena, but had actually provided the evidence that Judge Harrison had used to justify such a favorable settlement for Elena. Judge Harrison concluded the proceedings by noting that the case served as a reminder that professional worth should be measured by achievement and expertise rather than by prejudiced assumptions about career hierarchies. Judge Harrison explained that Elena's professional accomplishments represented exactly the kind of dedicated service that deserved recognition and respect from the medical community and society at large. Elena left the courthouse beside Sarah Chun, who was clearly pleased with the outcome, but noted that the real victory was the public recognition of Elena's professional achievements rather than the financial settlement. Elena appreciated the observation, but realized that the financial security would allow her to continue focusing on patient care rather than worrying about the economic consequences of her dedication to nursing excellence. The following weeks brought consequences for the Ashworth family that extended far beyond the financial implications of the divorce settlement. Word of Victoria's courtroom testimony spread quickly through the medical community, particularly among the charity organizations where Victoria had previously enjoyed respect and influence as a knowledgeable advocate for healthcare causes. Elena learned from colleagues that Victoria had been quietly asked to step down from her leadership role in the Children's Hospital Foundation, apparently due to concerns that her public statements about nursing had damaged her credibility as an advocate for healthcare excellence. Elena felt no satisfaction in Victoria's professional downfall, but recognized that consequences were appropriate for someone who had used a position of influence to spread ignorance about medical professional relationships. Marcus faced his own professional challenges as physicians who had attended the court proceedings began questioning his judgment and character. Elena heard from mutual acquaintances that Marcus's partners in the surgical consortium were concerned about the potential impact of the divorce publicity on their practice reputation, particularly given the contrast between Marcus's dismissive attitude toward Elena and the evidence of her professional excellence that had emerged during the trial. Elena returned to work at Riverside Medical Center to find that news of her courtroom vindication had spread throughout the hospital, creating an atmosphere of celebration among colleagues who had long respected her expertise but were now aware of the external recognition she had received for her professional achievements. Elena appreciated the support, but emphasized that her focus remained on patient care rather than legal victories. Dr. Stevens approached Elena during her first day back with news that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Elena's career. The hospital board had accelerated Elena's promotion to Associate Chief of Nursing for Cardiac Services, a position that would place her among the senior leadership team and provide opportunities to influence patient care protocols throughout the institution. Elena accepted the promotion with the same quiet dignity that had characterized her response to the Ashworth family's attacks on her professional worth. Elena understood that the new position would bring increased responsibilities and visibility, but she remained committed to the hands-on patient care that had always defined her sense of purpose and professional satisfaction. Elena's first day in her new role brought a complex case that reminded her why she had chosen nursing as her career despite the challenges and occasional lack of recognition from people who misunderstood the profession's requirements. A 2-year-old girl with a rare cardiac defect required the kind of specialized monitoring and family support that demanded every aspect of Elena's training and experience. Elena worked alongside the surgical team with the confidence and authority that came from years of proven expertise in critical care situations. The surgeons consulted her about monitoring protocols and post-operative care strategies, recognizing her knowledge as essential to successful patient outcomes. Elena's recommendations influenced surgical timing and recovery planning, demonstrating the collaborative nature of modern medical practice that Victoria had failed to understand. The successful surgery and flawless recovery periods served as a reminder that Elena's true victory was not the financial settlement or public vindication, but the opportunity to continue saving lives and supporting families through the most challenging medical crises. Elena's expertise made the difference between hope and heartbreak for parents whose children depended on her knowledge and dedication. Elena's colleagues organized a small celebration in the break room to acknowledge both her legal victory and professional advancement. But Elena found herself most satisfied by the successful outcome for the 2-year-old patient whose complex case had required everything Elena had learned during her years of specialized training. Elena thought about how much has changed since those early days when Marcus's family questioned her dedication and professional worth. The Ashworth family had learned that their prejudices about nursing were not only wrong but costly, while Elena had discovered that her expertise and achievements were recognized and valued by people who understood the critical importance of advanced nursing practice. What personal challenges have you overcome that others initially underestimated or dismissed? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your true worth was finally recognized after being overlooked? Share your thoughts in the comments about how this story resonated with your own experiences of proving your value when others doubted your capabilities. Elena returned to her patient rounds that evening with renewed appreciation for the profession she had chosen and the recognition she had earned through years of dedicated service. The courtroom proceedings had ended with complete vindication, but Elena understood that her real victory was the opportunity to continue making a difference in the lives of children and families who needed her expertise and compassion. Elena's story serves as a powerful reminder that professional worth should never be measured by others' prejudices or limited understanding, but by the actual achievements, expertise, and dedication that define true excellence in any field. The Ashworth family's attempt to diminish Elena had ultimately revealed the depth of their ignorance and the magnitude of Elena's professional accomplishments. Elena finished her shift that night knowing that she had not only survived the challenge to her personal and professional worth, but had emerged stronger and more recognized than ever before. The quiet nurse who had been dismissed as only a healthcare worker had proven herself to be an irreplaceable expert whose knowledge and leadership were essential to saving lives and advancing medical excellence.